Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Jack. Back again to talk about Battle for Azeroth and some of the big reasons why I'm excited for it, and, hopefully you guys are as well, alright? The new expansion announcement's been crazy, and I realized I just kind of hadn't made a video about it. So, off the information we know so far, here's some of the big things that are making me really excited for it. Starting off, artifact power, right? Artifact power is not being removed. It's turning into, the Azeroth's blood, basically, and then you're going to be putting it into your legendary or artifact neck piece, basically. So they're changing around a little bit with how artifact power works, but they're keeping the concept. But they're also not putting in the same crap that we all hated about it, right? For one, at the beginning of the expansion, artifact power sucked in Legion, and they really made it less and less of an issue as we went throughout the expansion. So they show that they learned from their mistakes, and now they're making sure that you can play multiple specs by having this neck piece on, and not having to worry about, oh, should I split my AP between this spec and have it to balance them out? And what if I'm a pure DPS and I've got 3 DPS specs, and I don't know how many of them there actually are, but what if all 3 of them are viable and, I have to balance between all of them, right? Or looking at what'll be my second point, legendaries, cutting them out. This is great. I was kind of hoping if they were really focused on saying we're gonna have legendaries, because they've had them for every expansion, right? If they were super focused on like having a legendary, I was gonna say, at least if you want to keep a similar system, really cut down on the legendary count, or make them all utility or something like that, just so that we're not having to farm for like 10 to 12 per spec, and then you have that weird item that requires you to get everything else. But we're not going to talk about that. That was a weird decision. But the fact that they're getting rid of it and they're going for more of these armor relics is the best way that really I've heard them described, is that, specific armor pieces are going to be used to enhance your character, the similar way of like legendaries / artifact traits, right? These pieces are not going to be Warforged, Titanforged socketed, so when you see the piece and it's already locked in as having those traits on it, it's going to be your best. You say, that one's the one I want. You don't have to worry about, oh, maybe it's Warforged, maybe it's Titanforged, socketed, whatever, right? And you have that option. You just say, this is the one, I want this, great. I love this idea. We still have to see more about it, but just right off the get-go, it fixes a bunch of problems that we have with legendaries, of just the randomosity, the big disparities in between like DPS / HPS increases, some performance-based increases, and utility-based increases. If I'm running, Mythic Plus or something like that on characters, I might switch between 3 to 5 legendaries, 3 to 6 maybe, because they all have different areas that they're good at. And if you are playing a new spec or a new class and you don't have the good legendaries, then it feels really crappy and you feel incomplete if you're watching other people who have legendaries performing higher, regardless of skill level. Silly. So really glad they're getting rid of those. New features coming out into the new expansion. Holy crap, the island invasions. They look so good. We don't really know a lot about them right now. But the island invasions, the basic gist of it is you have this little expedition that you and 2 other buddies are going to go into, and you basically are racing / competing against the opposing faction. And there's 3 difficulties, normal, heroic, and mythic, to fighting AI, which are apparently going to be really smart. So think of this as like scenarios meets PvP / competitive PvE. Kind of weird, but I love the idea of it, where, the engine's going to change the experience every single time. You have to race against the opposing faction. And there's, of course, the 4th difficulty, which is going to be PvP. And it's going to be actual players that you're going up against. Depending on the reward systems and what they're going to put into this, I feel like this is just a system I could just play all day, right? If the AI lives up to, the expectations, if, there is a pretty good system for PvP for putting like, oh, you're with all tanks, here's all tanks that you're going to face up against, or something similar to that, right? Where if I go with a bunch of healer buddies, I'm not going to go up against like 3 rogues that are just going to annihilate us and stuff like that, right? Hopefully not. So if they're able to have some kind of adjustment for the system to make sure that the PvP is going to be legit, I'm all for it. I think this just sounds like an awesome way to do artifact power, the heart of Azeroth, or the Azeroth power now, and B, it's just something that's a new feature, new PvE content that also kind of builds on scenarios, because it wasn't really that I didn't like scenarios in Mists of Pandaria when they were really playing with them a lot. It's just that they weren't my favorite thing, right? They didn't have crazy big rewards to it, so it's just like, oh yeah, this is kind of like a cool feature, but there wasn't a specific place for it. You'd farm it, I believe, for like a little bit of valor and things like that. But overall, it was something that was kind of just like a sideshow, really. But now if they're making it more and more front and center, they're putting the rewards and stuff like that behind it, I'm all for it. I love the idea of it. Speaking of what they should be adding more rewards for, we don't know quite about this yet, but they're building on top of Mythic Plus Dungeons based off of, the crazy amount of success that they've had in Legion. And going forward, they're going to be ramping up. They're going to be changing things around Mythic Plus. I really am looking forward to seeing, some kind of battle res timer like they've, kind of mentioned, they kind of hinted at here and there. Definitely looking forward to some affixes being removed, some new ones being added, things like that. And, definitely making it more interesting for the spectator as well, for future MDIs, if they do choose to have any of them, right? So some of I would say the top two that I'd love to have removed would be Bursting and Necrotic, right off the bat. And shockingly, those affect healers a lot, right? Which is part of the reason why I'd love to see them go. Bursting just absolutely destroys pulls, and it really destroys consistency of pulls week to week, where you just say, we have to completely change how we pull stuff because it's bursting now. And we can't do any like crazy fun looking big pulls and stuff like that in Mythic Plus, even if we're doing a low dungeon. And it also punishes you if you're running dungeons that are not your level, because you just annihilate everything at the same time, and then you just deal with scaling ticking damage, right? Great. Necrotic, just because of the fact that like so many tanks can struggle with this, and so many different types of tanks struggle more or less depending on the spec they are. So you feel ultra punished for bringing X tank instead of Y tank to your Necrotic runs. Feels pretty horrible. The lack of counterplay there for both of those affixes really feels bad. They're not super flashy. They're not super showy. I don't think, from an MDI perspective, neither of them were showed in the first one. So I don't really see whether, they'd want to kind of bring that going forward. So hopefully those two are removed, and my life as a healer will just get a lot easier, right? The PvP changes and stuff like that going forward, not a huge focus for me, but the allied races is something I actually love. And even for me, where I'm more casual with lore, it still just kind of makes sense, because we interact with all these different factions, and it's just like, oh yeah, thanks for the help, and bye afterwards, every single time after you're done, right? So, Zandalari Trolls, I'm actually highly considering switching my priest to Zandalari Troll. We'll see. Actually being able to stand upright and just looking really fucking awesome is definitely a huge point and huge feather in their cap for me. Thanks so much, guys, for watching. Let me know what you guys are really excited about, or maybe what you're worried about for Battle for Azeroth as well, because it is still early. We know we don't have any early access and stuff like that just yet to be getting right into the mix to see what's going on. So a lot of times you got just speculation. So thank you for watching, guys. Hope you all enjoy it, and I'll catch you all next time.